In our second reaction video, we listened to an interview with Eugene Schultz, the author of the book Why They Do It: Inside the Minds of the White-Collar Criminal. He took a unique approach in this book to crime in general, but definitely his focus was white-collar crime. He thought of it from the perspective of the perpetrator instead of the victim. White-collar crime refers to offenses that are designed to produce financial gain using some sort of deception. Some examples of this include tax evasion, insider trading, insurance fraud, bribery, embezzlement, money laundering, and it also covers international business. It applies to foreign businesses that are listed on the U.S. Stock Exchange and that conduct business within the U.S. In the video, it was financial fraud in the United States was stated as costing nearly $400 billion annually. I find that amount astonishing. And actually, when I looked into it a little bit more, according to Forbes, 1 year ago, it's actually $5 billion annually, which exceeds the estimated cost of personal property crime, which is listed only at $15 billion annually, which still $15 billion is a lot, but wow, $500 billion. Some of the interesting facts that I pulled out from the video were that prosecuting white-collar crime is recent in history. Generally, historically, there was not moral outrage regarding this type of crime. My guess is, though, it hasn't been to the extremes that we have these days. Some of the examples that were given, some of the examples that were given, the one that really stood out to me was the example of the executives who had been found guilty of white-collar crime were sent to prison, jail, whatever their sentence was, for a relatively short period of time, and then were able to return to their jobs as if they had been on vacation. That there was kind of not really anything punitive or wrong with the crimes that they had committed, actually for the companies that allowed them to return to the positions that they held previously. To me, that is just astonishing. I can't even imagine that we would do that in this day and age. Some of the findings from Schultz research was that these individuals that are committing or participating in this white-collar crime don't think that they will end up in prison and don't see prison as a possible outcome. Many of them do not even show remorse for the harm that they have caused to others. Their remorse is really more personal. Missing birthdays, missing graduations. They don't really express remorse for the harm that they have caused to others. And some of the indications are that when harm is distant, you don't feel what you are doing is harmful. One of the examples, again, that he gave in the book was of Stephen Garfinkel, who was a financial advisor, and he was signing false contracts and didn't think about that as lying because it was just a piece of paper. But he wouldn't have been able to do it if he was looking those people who were represented on that paper face to face. So it definitely is a different type of crime that way. And in some ways, I think it's even more far-reaching than what they talk about personal property crime. I mean, certainly the numbers financially show that it is further reaching, but I took an opportunity to watch some of the video about the Enron situation and the documentary that had been about the smartest guys in the room. And some of the things that struck me were really how far-reaching that Enron situation was. Enron had grown tremendously And when things were happening and falling apart, it really was a far-reaching crime, much more so than that of what is personal property. So the number of people that can be affected by white-collar crime is again astonishing. And I think while we probably sit in our homes and think, oh, that's probably not us, or it wouldn't affect us, it really could. Probably we all have investments or will have investments at some time, and all of these kind of things certainly can affect our futures. People have lost all of their retirements in these types of crimes. So it's definitely a further reaching type of crime than other types of crime are. So then I think the focus turns to the business side of things, because that's really our focus in this class. So what can businesses do, and the sort of business law aspect of what is going on here. And I think one of the things that needs to be looked at is what can businesses do to prevent this type of crime. And some of the things that I have read and were talked about within the video are training employees what to look for, the incorporating business ethics into what we expect of our employees, and providing, making sure that people are thinking ethically within the business. And as Warren Buffett asks his employees to think that way, I think that is certainly a way that we need to continue to think as we are going into the business realm of things. If something doesn't feel right, then it probably isn't right. And we need to be aware of that. I think, one of the sites that I had looked on was ways to prevent. And so the first thing that it talked about was verification systems. And in that, it talked about making sure that no one person has access to too much power or access to too much information. And while I direct a daycare and we're probably very, small in the world of business, even something as small as a verification system can certainly affect a business such as mine. So making sure that there isn't one person who is in sole control, that there aren't other eyes that are looking at things and making sure that things are on the up and up, and things are being taken care of appropriately. Because white collar crime doesn't have to be something that affects tons of people. White collar crime can be something that affects people in a very small business, such as a childcare center. When things are done financially to alter books and that type of thing, those are white collar crime situations. So those can affect any kind of business. Making sure that you're tracking internet activities within businesses. This particular site states that oftentimes white collar crime is involving of the internet. So making sure that if you do have internet activities within your business, or businesses that you represent, that there's some sort of check and balance tracking type system. Another thing that they suggested was working with a white collar crime attorney. And I'm sure that is really in regards to what the laws are and how businesses can take appropriate action to be sure that their companies are functioning within the law and what is ethical and legal. So, especially, as you're looking at tracking through internet activities, monitoring employees, those are all things that you would want to be sure you are doing within the law that would govern the business in which you are functioning in the area of the country or wherever, making sure that you're following those particular rules of, how you can do that appropriately, ethically, and within the law. So I think that as I looked a little bit further into some of these things, it I do agree with Eugene Schultz that people don't necessarily think, ooh, as they're sitting in the classroom, like, I'm going to be one of those white collar criminals. But I think that that is much the case in a lot of crime. I'm not sure that people, sit and ponder during their young life that this is the type of crime that they're going to commit. I do think that things such as white collar crime can certainly be a slippery slope. I think that it is important that people maintain a high level of ethical behavior within their business because I think that small little steps could lead to criminal acts, even if, initially it wasn't done on purpose. Within the Enron situation, it really seems that the behavior of the traders was being encouraged by the executives of the company. And so when you are kind of getting those directives from somebody above you that you are trusting to make the appropriate decisions, then maybe you're not following exactly what your own personal ethics were. One of the comments within the video that I had watched about Enron was that, if you had to step on somebody to get somewhere, then by goodness, you were stepping on them to get somewhere. And when you step back and you think about that, that's not appropriate behavior. And if somebody was really thinking logically, wouldn't they think that's not appropriate behavior? So another site that I had looked at, it talks about making sure that you are designing your job incentives appropriately and that you don't have poor job incentives, because certainly in this particular situation with these traders, the job incentives were not appropriate. Knowing that they were going to discharge 15% of their employees on an annual basis, and you had to be following incentives that were really against probably what people would believe as moral and ethically appropriate, is certainly contributed to some of their situation. So I think management needs to take a hard, fast look at their ethics and not be nonchalant about the ethics component of their business. So I did find this video interesting. I certainly think, for me at least, it opened up a world that I probably haven't given much thought about, except for what you see on the news. I do find it very interesting that of white collar crime, the people who are involved really think of it as a victimless crime, and this is certainly very untrue. So what are ways that businesses and business law can put faces on the victims for these people to see them more as victims when they're making these choices? So how could the traders in Enron been more aware of the victims that were being affected by their behavior, instead of seeing them as victimless crimes, that they weren't really hurting anybody? In situations where people are embezzling from companies, how can those people see what they're doing in a criminal light, instead of saying, oh, I'm just going to borrow this for now and I'll put it back? What they're doing is illegal. And how can you make them see that situation, that they are committing a crime? I did think it was interesting when Eugene talked about those types of crimes like speeding, and that we don't really think about necessarily. And certainly purposely, you wouldn't be, speeding to hurt somebody, but the white collar crime is sort of that way. It seems from his interviews with white collar criminals to information that I've also gathered in a little bit of research, people do see this as victimless, and it certainly isn't. And I think that it's important that businesses and the legislature puts appropriate situations in place to prevent, and as far as the legislature is concerned, and legally, um, set extremely high um, punishments for those who are participating in these kind of activities. Perhaps that is a way to deter them from this type of behavior. Again, nobody thinks that they will enter, white collar crime while they're sitting in college classes, but obviously, even just looking at the beginning of chapter 6, we see there are just so many, and those are probably only a very few of the cases that we will see as we continue to read. So making sure that as our businesses are changing, that we are growing and changing the norms and values over time, and how to keep those in mind in day-to-day thinking and day-to-day decision making. Know where, as an organization, weaknesses may happen, and making sure that we address them um, will be very important. And making sure that the nature of the business is held close, and really trying to keep ethically an eye on and an ear on and a face on exactly what we're doing and the choices that we are making.